Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Chapter 23. Maitreya Uvacha Drishtvatmanam Pravayasam Ekada Vainya Atmavan Atmana Vardita Sheshaha Vayusargah Prajapatihi Jagatastushaschapi Vruttido dharma satam nishpaditeshvara desho yadartamiha jaghivan yadarhamiha jahnivan Atmajeshvatmajamnyasya virahadudatimiva prajaso vimanasvekaha sadarogattapovanam. At the last stage of his life, when Maharaja Pruthu saw himself getting old, that great soul who was kind of the world, he was that great soul who was king of the world, divided whatever opulence he had accumulated amongst all kinds of living entities, moving and non-moving. He arranged pensions for everyone according to the religious principles, and after executing the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in complete coordination with him, he dedicated his sons unto earth, which was considered to be his daughter. Then Maharaja Pruthu left the presence of his citizens, who were almost lamenting and crying from feeling separation from the king, and went to the forest alone with his wife to perform austerities. Tatrapyadabhyaniyamo vaikanasa susammate arabdha ugratapasi yata svavijaye pura. After retiring from family life, Maharaja Pruthu strictly followed the regulations of the retired life and underwent severe austerities in the forest. He engaged in these activities as seriously as he had formerly engaged in leading the government and conquering everyone. Kandamulapalaharaha shushkaparnashanah kvachit abhaksha kitichit pakshan vayubhakshastatah param. In the Tapovana, Maharaja Pruthu sometimes ate the trunks and roots of trees, and sometimes he ate fruit and dried leaves, and for some weeks he drank only water. Finally, he lived simply by breathing air. Grishme panchatapa viro varshasvasara shan munihi akantamagna shishire udakes tindileshayah udakestandileshayah. Following the principles of forest living and the footsteps of the great sages and munis, Pruthu Maharaja accepted 5 kinds of heating processes during summer season, exposed himself to torrents of rain in the rainy season, and in winter stood in water up to his neck. He also used to simply lie down on the floor to sleep. तितिक्षुर्यत वाग्धान्ता ऊर्ध्वरेता जितानिलः आरिराध्य इषुः कृष्णम् अचरत्तप उत्तमम्. Maharaja Pruthu underwent all these severe austerities in order to control his words and his senses, to refrain from discharging his semen, and to control the life air within his body. After this, he did for the satisfaction of Krishna. All this he did for the satisfaction of Krishna. He had no other purpose. Tena kramanusiddhena dhvastkarmamalashayah pranayamai sanniruddha shadvargaschinnabandhanah. By thus practicing severe austerities, Maharaja Pruthu gradually became steadfast in spiritual life and completely free of all desires for fruitive activities. He also practiced breathing exercises to control his mind and senses, and by such control, he became completely free from all desires for fruitive activity. Sanat Kumaro Bhagavan Yada Hyadhyatmikam Param Yogam Tenaiva Purusham Abhajat Purusharshabha. Thus, the best among human beings, Maharaja Pruthu followed the path of spiritual advancement which was advised by Sanat Kumara. That is to say, he worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Bhagavad Dharmina Sadhoho Shraddhaya Yatatas Sada Bhaktir Bhagavati Brahman Bhaktir Bhagavati Brahmanya Ananya Vishaya Bhavat. Maharaja Pruthu thus engaged completely in devotional service, executing the rules and regulations strictly according to principles 24 hours daily. Thus his love and devotion unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, developed and became unflinching and fixed. Tasyanaya bhagavatah parikarma shuddhas sattvatmanastadanu samsmarananupurtya jnanam viraktamadabhunnishitena yena chicheda samshayapadam nija jiva kosham. By regularly discharging devotional service, Pruthu Maharaja became transcendental in mind and could therefore constantly think of the lotus feet of the Lord. Because of this, he became completely detached and attained perfect knowledge by which he could transcend all doubt. Thus, he was freed from the clutches of false ego and the material conception of life. Chinnan yadhira digatas Tirnirihas tattyajet chinadidam vayunena yena tavanna yoga gatibhir yatira pramatto yavad gadagrajakatasu gatimna kuryat. When he became completely free from the conception of bodily life, Maharaja Pruthu realized Lord Krishna sitting in everyone's heart as Paramatma. Being thus able to get all instructions from him, he gave up all other practices of yoga and jnana. He was not even interested in the perfection of the yoga and jnana systems, for he thoroughly realized that devotional service to Krishna is the ultimate goal of life, and that unless the yogis and the jnanis become attracted to Krishna Katha, narrations about Krishna, their illusions concerning existence can never be dispelled. एवं स वीरप्रवरः संयोज्यात्मानमात्मनि ब्रह्मभूतो दृढं काले तत्याजस्वं कलेवरम्. In due course of time, when Pruthu Maharaja was to give up his body, he fixed his mind firmly upon the lotus feet of Krishna, and thus completely situated on the Brahma Bhuta platform, he gave up the material body. Sampidya payum parshnibhyam vayumutsarayanchanaihi nabhyam koteshvavastapya hrudurah kantashirshani. When Maharaja Pruthu practiced a particular yogic sitting posture, he blocked the doors of his anus with his ankles pressed his right and left calves, and gradually raised the life air upward, passing it onto the circle of his navel, up to the heart and throat, and finally pushed it upwards to the central position between his eyebrows. Utsarpayam stutam मूर्ध्निम् उत्सर्पयं स्तुतं मूर्ध्नि क्रमेणावेश्य निःस्पृहः वायुं वायौक्षितो कायं तेजस्तेजस्य युयुजत. In this way, Pruthu Maharaja gradually raised his air to life up to the hole in the skull, whereupon he lost all desire for material existence. Gradually he merged his air of life with the totality of air, his body with the totality of earth, and the fire within the body with the totality of fire. Kanyakashe dravam toye yathasthanam vibhagashah क्षितिमम्भसि तत्तेजः यदो वायौ नभस्यमुम्. In this way, according to the different positions of the various parts of the body, Pruthu Maharaja merged the wholes of his senses with the sky, his bodily liquids such as blood and various secretions with the totality of water, and he merged earth with water, then water with fire, fire with air, air with sky, and so on. Indriyeshu manasthani tanmatreshu yatodbhavam bhutadinamun yutkrishya mahatyatmani sandhade. He amalgamated the mind with senses and the senses with the sense objects according to the respective positions, and he also amalgamated the material ego with the total material energy, Mahattattva. Tam sarva guna vinyasam jive mayamayenyadhat tam chanushayamaatmasyam asavanushai puman jnana vairagya viryena swarupastho jahat Prabhu. Pruthu Maharaja then offered the total designation of the living entity unto the supreme controller of illusionary energy, being released from all the designations by which the living entity became entrapped. He became free by knowledge and renunciation, and by spiritual force of his devotional service. In this way, being situated in his original constitutional position of Krishna consciousness, he gave up his body as a Prabhu or controller of the senses. Archirnama Maharagni Tatpatanyanugatavatam Sukumaryatadarhacha Yatpadbhyam Sparshanam Bhuvaha. The queen, the wife of Pruthu Maharaja, whose name was Archi, followed her husband into the forest. Since she was a queen, her body was very delicate. Although she did not deserve to live in the forest, she voluntarily touched her lotus feet to the ground. अतीव भर्तुर्व्रतधर्मनिष्ठया शुश्रूषया चार्षदेहयात्रया नाविन्दतार्तिं परिकर्षितापि सा प्रेयस्करस्पर्शनमाननिर्वृतिः. Although she was not accustomed to such difficulties, Queen Archi followed her husband in the regulatory principles of living in the forest like great sages. She lay down on the ground and ate only fruits, flowers, and leaves, and because she was not fit for these activities, she became frail and thin. Yet, because of the pleasure she derived in serving her husband, she did not feel any difficulties. Deham विपन्नाखिल चेतनादिकं पत्युः पृथिव्याधयितस्य चात्मनः आलक्ष्य किञ्चिच्चखिलप्यसासति चितामतारोपयदद्रिसानुनि. When Queen Archi saw that her husband, who had been so merciful to her and the earth, no longer showed symptoms of life, she lamented for a little while and then built a fiery pyre on top of the hill and placed the body of her husband on it. Vidhaya Krutyam Hridini Jalapluta Datvodakam Bharturudhara Karmanaha Natva Divistam Stridasham Trihparitya Vivesha Vahnim Dhyayati Bhartrupadau. After this, the queen executed the necessary funerary functions and offered oblations of water. After bathing in the river, she offered obeisances to various demigods situated in the sky in different planetary systems. She then circumambulated the fire and, while thinking of the lotus feet of her husband, entered into flames. Vilokyanugatam sadvim Prutum Veeravaram Patim Tuštuvurvarada Devair Devapatnya Sahasrashaha. After observing this brave act performed by the chaste wife Archi, the wife of the great Pruthu, many thousands of the wives of the demigods, along with their husbands, offered prayers to the queen, for they were very much satisfied. Kurvartya Kusumasaram Tasmin Mandarasanuni Tadatsvamaraturjeshu Ghrunanti sma parasparam. At that time, the demigods were situated on the top of Mandara hill, and all their wives began to shower flowers on the funeral pyre and began to talk amongst themselves as follows. Devya uchuhu aho iyam vadhur अहो इयं वधूर्धन्या या चैवं भूभुजां पतिं सर्वात्मना पतिं भेजे यज्ञेशं श्रीर्वधूरिव. The wives of the demigods said, "All glories to Queen Archi. We can see that this queen of the great King Pruthu, the emperor of all the kings of the world, had served her husband with mind, speech, and body exactly as the goddess of fortune serves the supreme personality of Godhead, Yajnesha or Vishnu. Saisha nunam vrajatyurdhvam anuvainyam patim sati pashyataasmanatityarchir durvibhavyena karmana." The wives of the demigods continued, "Just see how this chaste lady Archi, by the dint of her inconceivable pious activities, is still following her husband upward as far as we can see. Tesham durapam kim त्वन्यन् मर्त्यानां भगवत्पदं भुवि लोलायुषो ये वै नैष्कर्म्यं साधयन्त्युत. In this material world, every human being has a short span of life, but those who are engaged in devotional service go back home, back to the Godhead, for they are actually on the path of liberation. For such persons, there is nothing which is not available. Savanchito batatmadruk krichrena mahata bhuvi labdva pavargyam manushyam vishayeshu vishanjate. Any person who engages himself within this material world in performing activities that necessitate great struggle, and who, after obtaining a human form of life, which is the chance to attain liberation from miseries, undertakes the difficult tasks of fruitive activities, must be considered to be cheated and envious of his own self. Maitreya uvacha स्तुवतीश्वमर srishu patilokam gata vadhuhu yam va atmavidam duryo vainyaf prapachyutashrayah. The great sage Maitreya continued speaking, "My dear Vidura, when the wives of the denizens of the heaven were thus talking amongst themselves, Queen Archi reached the planet which her husband Maharaja Pruthu, the topmost self-realized soul, had attained. Ittam bhutanubhavosau Prutussa Bhagavatamaha kirtitam tasya Charitam udamacharitasya. Maitreya continued, "The greatest of all devotees, Maharaja Pruthu, was very powerful, and his character was liberal, magnificent, and magnanimous. Thus I have described him to you as far as possible. Yaidam sumahat punyam shraddhaya vahitah patet Shravayet Chrunuyadvapi Saprutof Padavi Miyat." Any person who describes the great characteristics of King Pruthu with faith and determination, whether he reads or hears of them himself or helps others to hear of them, is certain to attain the very planet which Maharaja Pruthu attained. In other words, such a person also returns home to the Vaikuntha planets, back to the Godhead. Brahmano Brahmavarchasvi Rajanyo Jagati Patihi Vaishyah Patan Vitpatihi. Shyachud Syachudra Sattamamiyat. If one hears of the characteristics of Pruthu Maharaja and is a Brahmana, he becomes perfectly qualified with Brahmanical powers. If he is a Kshatriya, he becomes a king of the world. If he is a Vaishya, he becomes a minister of other Vaishyas and many animals. And if he is a Sudra, he becomes the topmost devotee. Trihkruta Trihkrutva idamakarnya naro naryatavadhruta apraja suprajatamo nirdhano dhanavattamaha. It does not matter whether one is a man or a woman. Anyone who with great respect hears this narration of Maharaja Pruthu will become the father of many children if he is without children, and will become the richest of men if he is without money. Aspashtakirtis suyasha murkho bhavati panditaha idam swastyayanam pumsam amangalya nivaranam. Also, one who hears this narration 3 times will become very reputable, and if he is not recognized in the society, and he will become a great scholar if he is illiterate. In other words, hearing the narrations of Pruthu Maharaja is so auspicious that it drives away all bad luck. Dhanyam yashasya mayushyam swargam kalimalapaham dharmartha mokshanam samyak siddhimabhipsubhihi shraddhayai tadanushravyam chaturnam karanam param. By hearing the narration of Pruthu Maharaja, one can become great, increase his duration of life, gain promotion to the heavenly planets, and counteract the contaminations of this age of Kali. In addition, one can promote the causes of religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Therefore, from all sides, it is advisable for a materialistic person who is interested in such things to read and hear the narrations of the life and character of Maharaja Pruthu. Vijayabhimuko Raja Shrutvai yan Balim tasmai harantyagre Rajanah prutaveyata. If a king who is desirous of attaining victory and ruling power chants the narration of Pruthu Maharaja 3 times before going forth on his chariot, all subordinate kings will automatically render all kinds of taxes unto him, and as they rendered unto Maharaja Pruthu simply upon his order. Muktan yasango bhagavat yamalam bhakti mudvahan vainyasya charitam punyam shrunuyachravayet patet. A pure devotee who is executing the different processes of devotional services may be situated in the transcendental position, being completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. But even he, while discharging the devotional service, must hear, read, and induce others to read about the character of life of Pruthu Maharaja. Vaichitra virya bihitam mahan mahatmya suchakam asmin krutamatim yartma partavim gatimapnuyat. The great sage Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, I have as far as possible spoken the narrations about Pruthu Maharaja which enrich one's devotional attitude. Whoever takes advantage of these benefits also goes back home, back to Godhead like Maharaja Pruthu. Anudinamidamadarena shrunvan Pruthu Charitam प्रतयन् विमुक्तसङ्गः भगवति भवसिन्धुपोतपादे स च निपुणां लभते गतिं मनुष्यः. Whoever with great reverence and adoration regularly reads, chants and describes the history of Maharaja Pruthu's activities will certainly increase unflinching faith and attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord's lotus feet are the boat by which one can cross the ocean of nescience. Thus ends the chapter entitled Maharaja Pruthu's Going Back Home. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.